My name is Daniel Mercer, and this is the story of how I lost everything: my wife, my best friend, my fortune, my home, and very nearly my mind, and how I built myself back up from the ashes to become something far more dangerous than the naive fool I once was. Part 2. Among other things, I released her hand and turned to Marcus, who was staring at me with dawning horror. "And you must be Marcus Webb, Victoria's husband." "Daniel," he breathed, "but you're supposed to be dead, ruined, living in a cardboard box somewhere?" I laughed, the sound light and easy. "Sorry to disappoint. As it turns out, I'm rather difficult to kill. Professionally speaking." Victoria had recovered her composure, but I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. The same calculations I had witnessed in our garden a decade ago. She was trying to figure out the angle, to understand what I wanted and how she could turn it to her advantage. "Daniel," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "It's been so long. You look, well, 10 years of therapy and good living." I signaled the bartender. "Can I buy you a drink? Both of you? I feel like we have so much to catch up on." They exchanged a glance, quick, nervous, layered with meanings I was not supposed to see. Then Victoria smiled, sliding into the seat beside me with the practiced grace of a woman who had made a career of seduction. "We'd love to," she said. "Tell us everything." And so I did. I told them about Seattle, about building my empire from scratch, about the various companies and ventures that had made me one of the wealthiest men they would ever meet. I was charming and self-deprecating and exactly as guileless as they remembered. I let them believe they were drawing me in, that Victoria's old magic still worked, that I was just another mark waiting to be fleeced. All the while, the trap was closing around them, and they had no idea. The campaign I had planned unfolded over the next 3 months with the precision of a military operation. The first phase targeted Margaret Chen, the foundation upon which Victoria's empire was built. Margaret's real estate holdings depended heavily on 3 major development projects, all of which required approval from city planning committees and zoning boards. Through a complex web of intermediaries, I had spent years cultivating relationships with the officials who controlled those approvals. A donation here, a favor there, nothing that could be traced back to me but enough to ensure that when the time came, doors would close that Margaret needed to stay open. The first blow came in the form of a denied variance for her flagship property downtown. The project had been years in development, millions already invested, and without the variance, it was worthless. Margaret's lawyers fought the decision, but appeals take time she didn't have, with creditors circling and cash flow tightening. The second blow came 2 weeks later, a health and safety investigation into several of her older buildings, triggered by anonymous complaints that had been carefully timed to cause maximum disruption. The investigations found violations, minor ones, mostly, but enough to force expensive remediation and generate headlines that spooked her investors. The third blow was financial. Through a subsidiary, I had acquired significant positions in 2 of Margaret's primary lenders. When her credit lines came up for renewal, the terms were unfavorable. Not refused outright. That would have been too obvious, but adjusted in ways that made her debt load suddenly unsustainable. Within 3 months, Margaret Chen's empire was hemorrhaging money faster than she could staunch the bleeding. Her carefully cultivated image of success began to crack as rumors spread through society circles, whispers of financial trouble, of deals gone sour, of a woman who had overreached and was about to pay the price. I watched her struggle from the shadows, feeling nothing. This woman had orchestrated the theft of everything I owned, had groomed her daughter to be the instrument of my destruction, had smiled at my wedding while planning my ruin. Whatever sympathy I might have felt for a fellow human being in distress had been burned out of me long ago. Phase 2 targeted Marcus. His investment firm, already weakened by years of poor decisions, was vulnerable to the right kind of pressure. Through various channels, I began acquiring the debts of several companies in which Marcus held significant positions. When those companies encountered unexpected difficulties, a failed product launch here, a regulatory problem there, their creditors came calling. And the creditors, whether they knew it or not, were ultimately answering to me. Marcus had always been a gambler at heart. Faced with mounting losses, he did exactly what I had predicted: he doubled down. He took bigger risks, made desperate plays, tried to recoup his losses through increasingly reckless bets. Each one played into my hands. The final nail came in the form of a sure thing, an inside tip on an upcoming merger that promised to return 10 times his investment. The tip came through a contact Marcus trusted, someone he had known for years, someone who had no idea they were being used as a conduit for information I had carefully manufactured. Marcus bet everything he had left on that merger. When the SEC investigation was announced instead, a routine inquiry that I had nudged in the right direction, the stock collapsed. And with it, the last remnants of Marcus Webb's financial independence. Phase 3 was Victoria herself. And Phase 3 was personal. Throughout my campaign against her mother and husband, I had maintained the pretense of friendly reconnection with Victoria. We had dinner occasionally, always in public, always with Marcus hovering nearby like a suspicious chaperone. I let her believe she was working me, probing for investment opportunities, testing the waters for a possible financial partnership between my holdings and her struggling family enterprises. "You've done remarkably well for yourself," she said one evening, her voice carrying a hint of the old seductive warmth. "Starting over from nothing, building all this. I have to admit, I underestimated you." Most people did. I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the candlelight play across its surface. "It's an advantage, being underestimated. People don't see you coming until it's too late." She laughed, but there was an edge of nervousness beneath it. Victoria had sensed, I think, that something was wrong, that her mother's sudden difficulties and Marcus's financial collapse were too well timed to be coincidental. But she couldn't bring herself to believe that the naive fool she had married could have become sophisticated enough to orchestrate such a thing. That blindness was her final mistake. The confrontation I had planned for 10 years came on a Friday evening in March, exactly 6 months after my return to the city. I had invited Victoria and Marcus to my penthouse for what I described as a business dinner, a discussion of potential investment opportunities that could save their sinking ship. They arrived together, Victoria in a designer dress that did nothing to hide the strain around her eyes, Marcus looking haggard and desperate in a suit that had seen better days. Margaret was not with them. She was too busy fighting fires to attend social engagements, but that was fine. Her reckoning would come separately. "Daniel," Victoria kissed my cheek, her perfume washing over me in a wave of unwanted memory. "Thank you for having us. We're so grateful you're willing to consider a partnership." Of course. I led them into the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. "Can I get you something to drink? Wine? Whiskey?" "Whiskey," Marcus said quickly. He looked like he needed it. I poured 3 glasses, taking my time, savoring the moment I had waited a decade to enjoy. Then I handed them their drinks and settled into the chair across from the couch where they sat, close but not touching, united only by their mutual desperation. "Before we discuss business," I said, "I want to tell you a story." Victoria exchanged a glance with Marcus. "A story? It's an old one. You might even remember it." I took a sip of my whiskey, letting the silence stretch. "Once upon a time, there was a man who had everything. A successful career, a beautiful wife, a best friend he trusted with his life. He was happy, genuinely, deeply happy, in a way that few people ever get to experience." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Victoria's face had gone very still. "But the man was a fool," I continued. "He didn't realize that his wife and his best friend were lovers. He didn't realize that his mother-in-law saw him as nothing more than a source of revenue. He didn't realize that the people he trusted most were systematically stealing everything he had, leaving him with nothing but humiliation and broken dreams." "Daniel," Victoria began. "I'm not finished." My voice was quiet, but something in it made her fall silent. "The man discovered the truth, eventually. He confronted his wife, and she laughed at him. She told him he had nothing, that she and her family had taken everything, and there was nothing he could do about it. She told him to leave, and like the beaten dog he was, he left." I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city I had once loved, the city where I had been destroyed and reborn. "But here's the part of the story you don't know." I turned back to face them, and I let them see, for the first time, the man I had become. The man didn't accept his defeat. He went away, yes, but not to hide. To rebuild, to plan, to become something far more powerful than the naive fool his wife had married. Victoria's face had gone pale. Marcus looked like he might be sick. For 10 years, the man watched his enemies from the shadows. He learned their weaknesses, their fears, their pressure points. He built a fortune that dwarfed what they had stolen from him. And when he was ready, when he had assembled all the pieces on the board, he came back. I returned to my chair, crossing my legs, the picture of casual elegance. "Your mother's financial troubles, Victoria? I caused them. The zoning issues, the investigations, the credit line problems, all me. Marcus's investment disasters? Also me. That insider tip that wiped out the last of your savings? I manufactured it from whole cloth." Marcus surged to his feet. "You son of a..." "Sit down." My voice cracked like a whip, and to my satisfaction, he said. You don't get to be angry with me, Marcus. You lost that right when you spent 3 years sleeping with my wife while pretending to be my friend. What do you want? Victoria's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling around her glass. You didn't invite us here just to gloat. What do you want? What do I want? I considered the question. I want what I've always wanted, Victoria. Justice. You took everything from me, my money, my home, my faith in the people I loved. You treated me like a mark, a stepping stone, a means to an end. And now I'm going to take everything from you. I reached into my jacket and withdrew a folder, which I placed on the coffee table between us. This contains documentation of every transaction your mother used to steal my assets. Every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer, every shell company and dummy account. I've shared copies with the State Attorney General's office, the SEC, and 3 different journalists who specialize in white-collar crime. Victoria's face went from pale to gray. By tomorrow morning, your mother will be facing criminal charges that will destroy what's left of her empire. By next week, she'll be fighting to stay out of prison. And you, Victoria, you were a knowing participant in her scheme. The documentation makes that very clear. Daniel, please, she was crying now, tears streaming down her perfect cheeks. I was young. My mother pressured me. I didn't know what I was doing. You knew exactly what you were doing. I felt nothing watching her tears, no satisfaction, no pity, only a cold emptiness where my love for her had once lived. Before we discuss business, I said, I want to tell you a story. Victoria exchanged a glance with Marcus. A story? It's an old one. You might even remember it. I took a sip of my whiskey, letting the silence stretch. Once upon a time, there was a man who had everything. A successful career, a beautiful wife, a best friend he trusted with his life. He was happy, genuinely, deeply happy, in a way that few people ever get to experience. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Victoria's face had gone very still. But the man was a fool, I continued. He didn't realize that his wife and his best friend were lovers. He didn't realize that his mother-in-law saw him as nothing more than a source of revenue. He didn't realize that the people he trusted most were systematically stealing everything he had, leaving him with nothing but humiliation and broken dreams. Daniel, Victoria began. I'm not finished. My voice was quiet, but something in it made her fall silent. The man discovered the truth, eventually. He confronted his wife, and she laughed at him. She told him he had nothing, that she and her family had taken everything, and there was nothing he could do about it. She told him to leave, and like the beaten dog he was, he left. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city I had once loved, the city where I had been destroyed and reborn. But here's the part of the story you don't know. I turned back to face them, and I let them see, for the first time, the man I had become. The man didn't accept his defeat. He went away, yes, but not to hide. To rebuild, to plan, to become something far more powerful than the naive fool his wife had married. Victoria's face had gone pale. Marcus looked like he might be sick. For 10 years, the man watched his enemies from the shadows. He learned their weaknesses, their fears, their pressure points. He built a fortune that dwarfed what they had stolen from him. And when he was ready, when he had assembled all the pieces on the board, he came back. I returned to my chair, crossing my legs, the picture of casual elegance. Your mother's financial troubles, Victoria? I caused them. The zoning issues, the investigations, the credit line problems, all me. Marcus's investment disasters? Also me. That insider tip that wiped out the last of your savings? I manufactured it from whole cloth. Marcus surged to his feet. You son of a... Sit down. My voice cracked like a whip, and to my satisfaction, he sat. You don't get to be angry with me, Marcus. You lost that right when you spent 3 years sleeping with my wife while pretending to be my friend. What do you want? Victoria's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling around her glass. You didn't invite us here just to gloat. What do you want? What do I want? I considered the question. I want what I've always wanted, Victoria. Justice. You took everything from me, my money, my home, my faith in the people I loved. You treated me like a mark, a stepping stone, a means to an end. And now I'm going to take everything from you. I reached into my jacket and withdrew a folder, which I placed on the coffee table between us. This contains documentation of every transaction your mother used to steal my assets. Every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer, every shell company and dummy account. I've shared copies with the State Attorney General's office, the SEC, and 3 different journalists who specialize in white-collar crime. Victoria's face went from pale to gray. By tomorrow morning, your mother will be facing criminal charges that will destroy what's left of her empire. By next week, she'll be fighting to stay out of prison. And you, Victoria, you were a knowing participant in her scheme. The documentation makes that very clear. Daniel, please, she was crying now, tears streaming down her perfect cheeks. I was young. My mother pressured me. I didn't know what I was doing. You knew exactly what you were doing. I felt nothing watching her tears, no satisfaction, no pity, only a cold emptiness where my love for her had once lived. The weeks that followed were everything I had planned. Margaret Chen was arrested on multiple counts of fraud and theft, her assets frozen, her reputation destroyed overnight. The society pages that had once celebrated her generosity now competed to document her fall from grace. She pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testimony against her co-conspirators, a list that included, inevitably, her own daughter. Victoria was not arrested, but only barely. The prosecutors decided that pursuing her would be more trouble than it was worth, given her willingness to cooperate and the difficulty of proving her direct involvement in the fraud. But her social standing was annihilated. Friends who had once clamored for her attention refused to return her calls. The organizations she had chaired requested her resignation. The life she had built with my money crumbled around her like a sand castle at high tide. Marcus, true to form, divorced her within 2 months. He claimed he had been deceived as much as I had, that Victoria and her mother had used him just as they had used me. The courts didn't believe him, but they granted the divorce anyway. He sold what remained of his possessions to begin paying down his debt to me, then moved to a small apartment in a part of the city where no one would recognize his name. I had won, completely, utterly, devastatingly. The people who had destroyed me were themselves destroyed, brought low by the same mechanisms of betrayal and manipulation they had once used against me. It was perfect, it was biblical, it was everything I had dreamed of during those dark nights in Seattle when revenge was the only thing keeping me alive. And yet, I found myself standing at the window of my penthouse one evening, watching the city lights glitter like fallen stars, and I could not escape the feeling that something was missing. The satisfaction I had expected to feel, the closure, the peace, the sense of a wrong made right, refused to materialize. In its place was an emptiness so profound that it frightened me. I had spent 10 years building toward this moment, 10 years of planning, of scheming, of subordinating every other aspect of my life to the singular goal of revenge. And now that goal had been achieved, I had no idea what to do next. Theodore Collins had warned me, all those years ago, success is hollow if there's nothing left inside. I had dismissed his words at the time, too focused on the distant horizon to worry about what I might find when I reached it. But he had been right. The man I had become, cold, calculating, driven by rage and the desire for payback, was not someone I recognized. Not someone I wanted to be. I had defeated my enemies. But in doing so, I had lost myself. The letter from Marcus arrived 3 months after our final confrontation. I almost threw it away unopened, assuming it was some kind of appeal for mercy or forgiveness. But something made me hesitate, perhaps curiosity, perhaps the ghost of the friendship we had once shared. The letter was not what I expected. Daniel, it began, I'm not writing to ask for anything. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, ever again. I'm writing because I need to say some things, and I need you to know that I mean them, even if you choose not to believe me. What I did to you was unforgivable. I knew it was wrong at the time, and I did it anyway. I told myself stories to justify it, that Victoria and I were meant to be together, that you would be fine, that the money was compensation for the happiness we were denying you. But those were lies I told myself so I could live with my choices. The truth is simpler and uglier. I was weak and selfish, and I betrayed the best friend I ever had because I wanted something that wasn't mine. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, and I wouldn't believe it even if you offered it. But I want you to know that I am genuinely, deeply sorry. Not because of what it cost me, though the cost has been considerable, but because of what it cost you. Because of the man you were before we broke you, and the man you've become in the aftermath. I saw you at that gala, and I saw what was behind your eyes. The coldness, the calculation, the absolute absence of the warmth that used to define you. That's on me. That's the real crime I committed, not the money, not even the affair, but the murder of the person you used to be. I killed Daniel Mercer, and the man who took his place scares me more than anything I've ever encountered. I don't know if there's anything left of the man I knew. I hope there is. I hope that somewhere beneath all that armor, some part of him survived. Because that man was good and kind and capable of a love that most people never experience. And if that man is truly gone, then I am responsible for something far worse than theft. Whatever happens next, I want you to know, you deserved better. From Victoria, from her mother, and most of all from me. You deserved a wife who loved you honestly and a friend who valued your trust. What you got instead was a conspiracy of the weak and the greedy, and for that, I am truly sorry. I will make the payments I owe you. I will live with the consequences of my choices. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to become a person who deserves the friendship you once offered me. I don't expect ever to see you again, and I understand why. But if you ever find it in yourself to remember the good years, the years before everything went wrong, I hope you'll remember that they were real, at least for me. Goodbye, Daniel. I hope you find peace. I read the letter 3 times, then set it aside and stared at the wall for a long time. The cynical part of me, the part that had kept me alive through a decade of darkness, whispered that this was another manipulation, another attempt to gain advantage. But there was something in Marcus's words that rang true, something that touched the place inside me where Daniel Mercer, the man I had been, still lingered like a ghost. Was it possible to come back from what I had become? To rediscover the capacity for trust, for love, for the simple human connections that had once defined my life? I had spent so long building walls around my heart that I no longer knew if there was anything left behind them worth protecting. But maybe that was the wrong question. Maybe the point wasn't whether the old Daniel could be resurrected, but whether a new version, wiser, more cautious, but still capable of growth, could be built from the ruins. I thought about Theodore Collins, who had seen something worth saving in a broken man and given him a chance to rebuild. I thought about the employees of my companies, thousands of people whose livelihoods depended on decisions I made. I thought about the charities I had funded anonymously over the years, the scholarships and programs that helped people escape circumstances as dire as my own had been. Maybe revenge wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was just the closing of one chapter, the necessary destruction that cleared the ground for something new. I picked up my phone and made a call I had been putting off for months. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, no relation to Margaret, thankfully, came highly recommended as a therapist specializing in trauma and recovery. Our first session was awkward, my defenses bristling at the vulnerability required to speak honestly about my experiences. But she was patient and perceptive, and over time, I began to trust her with pieces of my story. You've been living in survival mode for 10 years, she observed one afternoon. Everything, the work, the planning, even the revenge itself, was about protecting yourself from ever being hurt that way again. But survival mode isn't sustainable, Daniel. Eventually, you have to stop surviving and start living. I don't know how, I admitted. I've been so focused on tearing them down that I never thought about what comes after. That's not uncommon. She leaned forward, her expression kind. Revenge fantasies often serve as a coping mechanism, a way to channel pain into something that feels productive. But they're inherently limited. They define you in relation to the people who hurt you, which means you're still letting them control your narrative. So how do I write a new one? By focusing on what you want, rather than what you're against. By building relationships based on honesty rather than strategy. By allowing yourself to be vulnerable, even knowing that vulnerability can lead to pain. She paused. None of this is easy. It requires you to take risks that feel terrifying, given what you've experienced. But the alternative is living in a fortress of your own construction, safe but utterly alone. I thought about that conversation often in the months that followed. Slowly, tentatively, I began to make changes. I reconnected with old friends I had abandoned in my flight from the city, accepting their surprise and their questions with a candor that felt foreign but gradually became more natural. I started dating again, not with an agenda, not as part of some elaborate plan, but simply as a man looking for connection. The first relationship ended after 6 weeks. I pushed her away when things started getting serious. The second lasted 3 months before my lingering paranoia sabotaged what might have been something real. But the third, a woman named Sarah, a pediatric surgeon with a laugh that reminded me of summer, that one stuck. Sarah knew my history. I told her everything on our 4th date, expecting her to run, expecting the familiar pattern of revelation followed by rejection. Instead, she listened with quiet attention, then took my hand. That must have been incredibly painful, she said, and I imagine it's made it very hard for you to trust anyone. It has, I admitted. Then we'll take it slow. She smiled, and there was no guile in it, no calculation, just warmth and genuine affection. I'm not going anywhere, Daniel. Not unless you want me to. It took me a long time to believe her. There were setbacks, moments when the old suspicion flared up and I pushed her away, nights when I woke from nightmares and couldn't be comforted. But Sarah was patient, and gradually, I learned that not everyone who gets close to you is planning to betray you. That trust, while risky, is also the only path to genuine intimacy. We were married 2 years later, in a small ceremony with only our closest friends. Theodore Collins served as my best man, a role I had once imagined Marcus filling, in a different life. The reception was modest, the vows simple, the love genuine and uncomplicated in a way I had never experienced before. Victoria sent a card. I don't know how she found out about the wedding, but her handwriting was unmistakable. "I hope you found happiness," it said. "I hope one of us has." I threw it away without responding. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. And some people, no matter how much they've suffered, do not deserve a place in your new life. 5 years have passed since my wedding to Sarah. I am 60 years old now, my hair more gray than brown, the fire of my younger years banked to a steady warmth. We have 2 children, late in life, unexpected, the greatest gift I never knew I wanted. A daughter named Elizabeth and a son named Theodore, after the people who helped me find my way back from the darkness. Prometheus Holdings continues to thrive, though I've stepped back from day-to-day operations. The empire I built in my years of exile has grown beyond what I ever imagined, creating jobs and opportunities for thousands of people. I take pride in that, though I try not to let the pride become another kind of armor. Margaret Chen died in prison 2 years ago, her health broken by stress and confinement. I felt nothing when I heard the news, not satisfaction, not sorrow, nothing at all. She had become irrelevant to my life long before her death made it official. Victoria, I hear, has rebuilt some semblance of a life. She works for a nonprofit now, helping other women escape abusive relationships. The irony is not lost on me. Perhaps she has genuinely changed, perhaps she has simply found a new angle, a new way to present herself as the victim rather than the perpetrator. I no longer care enough to find out. Marcus continues to make his monthly payments, now reduced to a manageable amount that reflects his current circumstances rather than his past debts. I could have forgiven the debt years ago. I have more money than I could spend in several lifetimes, and the payments are meaningless to me financially. But forgiveness requires a letting go that I have not yet achieved. Perhaps I never will, and yet, last month, I received another letter. Not from Marcus this time, but from his daughter, a young woman I had never met, the child of his second marriage. She wrote to introduce herself, to explain that her father had told her everything about his past, and to ask if I might consider meeting with her. Not to advocate for forgiveness, she assured me, but simply to understand. "My father is not a good man," she wrote. "He knows this, and so do I. But he has tried to be better, in the years since everything fell apart. He has tried to teach me the lessons he learned too late, about honor, about trust, about the consequences of betrayal. I don't expect you to forgive him, but I would like to know the man he hurt so badly, the man whose shadow has hung over our family for as long as I can remember." I have not responded yet. Part of me wants to throw the letter away, to maintain the clean separation between my past and my present. But another part, the part that Sarah has nurtured back to life, the part that my children have awakened, wonders if there might be value in the connection. Not forgiveness, exactly, I don't know if I'm capable of that, where Marcus is concerned. But perhaps something else, an acknowledgement that people can change, that the sins of the father need not define the daughter, that the story doesn't have to end with revenge. I've been thinking about what I would say to her, if I agreed to meet. I would tell her about the man I was before her father and Victoria destroyed me, the naive, trusting fool who believed the best in everyone. I would tell her about the darkness that followed, the years of planning and scheming and the cold satisfaction of revenge finally achieved. And I would tell her about the emptiness that came after, the long climb back toward something resembling a full life. Most importantly, I would tell her this: the greatest revenge is not destruction. It's survival. It's building a life so full and meaningful that the people who tried to break you become footnotes in a much larger story. It's proving, through the simple act of living well, that they failed to destroy what mattered most. I look at my children, Elizabeth reading on the couch, Theodore building something elaborate with blocks, and I know that this is my true victory. Not the money, not the comeuppance I delivered to my betrayers, but this: a home filled with love, a family built on honesty, a life that would have been impossible if I had stayed the cold, calculating creature revenge had made me. Sarah comes up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist. You're brooding again, she says. I can always tell. Just thinking about the past. Anything I should worry about? No. I turn to face her, taking in the face I have come to love more than I ever loved Victoria's. Just grateful for where I ended up. She kisses me, soft and familiar. Me too. And that, in the end, is the only ending that matters. Not the betrayal that started everything, not the revenge that consumed a decade of my life, but this moment, standing in a warm kitchen, surrounded by the family I built from the ashes of the one that was stolen from me. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was betrayed by the people I loved most, and I rose from the wreckage to become something they never imagined possible. I achieved revenge so complete that it destroyed everything my enemies held dear. And then I did the hardest thing of all. I let it go. I moved forward. I built a life worth living. The story doesn't end with vengeance. It ends with redemption. Not the kind that comes from forgiving those who wronged you, but the kind that comes from forgiving yourself. From accepting that you cannot control how others treat you, only how you respond. From understanding that the best revenge is not making your enemies suffer, but refusing to let their actions define the rest of your days. I pick up Marcus's daughter's letter and read it one more time. Then I sit down at my desk, pull out a fresh sheet of paper, and begin to write. Dear Ms. Webb, I write. Thank you for your letter. I would be willing to meet. The pen moves across the paper, and with each word, I feel something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, that may never come, but something close to peace. Something that feels, for the first time in a very long time, like home. There is a particular kind of silence that settles over a house when its foundation is strong. It is the silence of contentment, of lives lived in harmony, of a marriage built on truth rather than deception. It is the silence I wake to every morning now, the silence I had forgotten was possible. The man who walked away from that garden 15 years ago would not recognize the man I have become. He was broken, humiliated, burning with a rage that would consume the next decade of his life. He thought revenge was the answer, the only answer, the ending his story demanded. He was wrong. The answer was never revenge. The answer was resilience. The answer was refusing to let the worst thing that happened to me become the whole of my identity. The answer was building something new from the rubble, something stronger and more beautiful than what was destroyed. I still carry the scars of what Victoria and Marcus and Margaret did to me. I still have moments when the old anger flares up, when I remember the garden and the bar and the years of darkness that followed. But the scars no longer define me. They are reminders of what I survived, not predictions of what I will become. This morning, I woke to the sound of my children laughing in the next room, to the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen, to the warmth of my wife's hand on my chest. I lay there for a moment, listening to the sounds of my life, this improbable, unexpected, infinitely precious life, and I allowed myself to feel grateful. Not grateful to them, of course. Never to them, but grateful for the journey that brought me here, even the darkest parts of it. Grateful for the person I became in the crucible of betrayal. Grateful for the love that found me when I had given up on ever being loved again. The long way back is the only way I know. It wound through years of pain and plotting, through revenge achieved and revenge transcended, through the slow and difficult process of learning to trust again. It was not the path I would have chosen, given the choice. But it brought me home. And home, in the end, is all any of us are looking for.